glass. It's glass made by a volcanic area.
Over there. You get if you want to go to the rock mineral
It probably formed over a few years of cooling. If it would not have taken that much time, it would be like that scoria pumice rock over there, all the air bubbles and stuff.
Are you really? Want to know how big this heavy?
Yeah, if it was 40 minutes a while ago, I think.
When the girls.
You have been here before. One of you? At all?
My nose is still wet.
Okay. All right, let me tell you about why we call this why we have a buffalo in here, for one thing, and why we called it the Buffalo Trace. It started a long time ago, and in this area, here's a map at Vincennes, came across the Wabash River, came down through the river here. Here's the whole Dubois County. Here is the town that became famous in Dubois County, and then they kept going across the falls of the Ohio at Louisville, and came to the salt, to have salt, because we need salt ourselves for our diet. And circle, well, we made the circle larger here, and this was the beginnings of people living of the white people living in Dubois County. Found that there was a spring in this area. So he would take his horns and his big, enormous head, and he would just go down and dig a hole in the ground. And when they dug the hole, water came up because there was a spring there. And so he would just keep digging and bouncing around and made the hole bigger and bigger. And he took himself a bath as long as he wanted to, because he could. He was the biggest, baddest, meanest one. Okay? And then after he got done, the second biggest, baddest one came in, and they would take a bath. And the others would see them, and they would start digging around, and the whole area was one big mud bath. And it was so bad that when people in North Carolina and Virginia and places like that wanted to come or send somebody else here, they'd say, well, you probably can't get through the road at the mud holes. And can you imagine saying that, I say, where are you from? And you say, mud holes? I'm from the mud holes. That wasn't a very good name for your town, was it? So they did not finish the town there. They started going up to Portersville, and Dubois County actually had their first county town or courthouse at Portersville, which is very nearby. How many of you have been to Portersville? All right. When you go from Jasper over the port, and there's a big, like a tombstone there, and that tombstone has the story of how Dubois County was settled at that tombstone. When I was a teacher at Ireland Elementary for 27 years, oh my gosh, I had 5th grade, and I would bring them on the tour, and we'd always go to Sherritt Cemetery. Do they still do that in the 5th grade? I think they do, yeah. Anyways.
When we arrived at the Ohio River, there was no bridge going across the river, so we crossed on a big flatboat called a ferry. And then when we arrived on the Indiana side, there was no road going to our new home in Indiana. So we traveled a little ways, and then my father would have to get down off the wagon, and he'd cut away the bushes and the trees for a little bit, and then he'd climb back up, and we'd travel a little ways. And you have to get down off the wagon again, cut away the bushes and the trees for a little bit, and then he'd climb back up, and we'd travel a little ways farther. And so it took us almost 2 whole weeks to travel the 16 miles from the Ohio River to our new farm here in Indiana. We arrived on our new farm in December of 1816. It was the very same month that Indiana became a brand new state in the United States of America. But it was December in Indiana. We didn't have a new home to move into, and it was very cold. So my father built what was called a half-face camp. It was kind of a lean-to made out of logs. It was open on one side. We had to build a big roaring fire, and we had to keep it going all the time to try to stay warm until we could get our new house built. Well, after a couple of weeks, all of the neighbors gathered together, and they helped us build a brand new log cabin. Now this log is as long as from here to that table over there, and about as wide as from here to maybe that back row of chairs back there. Had a big open fireplace in one end. Now we kept the fire going there all the time. My mother used it all year round to cook on. We used it during the winter time to try to stay warm. We had a dirt floor. My mother and father slept on a bed beside the fireplace, and my sister Sarah slept on the floor beside the bed. We had a big opening in one side we used for a doorway. And when we first moved in, we didn't have a door to put over that opening. They built a loft up overhead for me to sleep in. Now, we didn't have a ladder for me to climb up, so my father put pegs in the wall, and I'd climb up the pegs to go to bed at night. I was tall even back then, and I had to be very careful going to bed that I didn't hit my head on the roof after a big storm, and that fur would be all wet. And sometimes in the middle of the winter, I'd wake up after a storm, and the fur would be all covered with snow. Now, when we moved, there were a lot of bears, a lot of wild animals still in the woods. I remember once, just before my 8th birthday, I looked out through a crack in the side of our new log cabin, and I saw a whole flock of wild turkeys out there. Well, I grabbed my father's rifle and I pointed it out through the crack, and I shot and I killed one of those turkeys. I was very proud of myself because I had killed. There in the wilderness, a lot of wild 8 miles away, with no cars and no roads and no telephones. That meant that if one of us got sick, we'd have to climb up on horseback and we'd have to ride for an entire day just to get to the nearest doctor. If we were
No?
You've seen those.
Bear's paw?
And then you put them on a thing in the email.
You do that?
Do they still make those?
You don't make it.
I like that. I mean, where did you my dog? You know, like you make it good and hard.
4, 5, 6, 7. All right.
Well, maybe you could take this pen and kind of draw an outline, and then you could put squares in it, and then cut others to fit wherever you drew. Make a road. You know, you could like, this is a road. Space in the middle, so the white.
Football, go. Someone did one, put a football in the middle. So it looks like wham, it cross between the goalposts. You can make a tree. You can make a dog's face. Flag, and but you could do anything. You just need to start, otherwise you won't get it finished. So let's start something.
Let's go start
You
gluing.
don't have to take the paper off.
Okay.
So you just stick them on
Were
there.
these
Look,
Indiana
okay?
color? Find some red ones.
Okay. I think I don't
You can also, when you go home, you can take a snapshot that you have. You can actually just make a picture frame and then put a special snapshot in the middle of it. Like if you have your favorite pet or something like that. So you need to start. But just think of something and then just go from there.
Okay. All colors, you're gonna do this, all different colors.
Close, isn't it?
The easiest that. Don't use
I just kind of choose because I was trying to make it all of them diagonal, but then that didn't work. So then I used it. His name is this way. Like, I need a I need one of these.
Looking really cool.
Here's no.
So remember, you have to be starting, or otherwise you'll not be finished. Looking very good.
I got it. I got it.
Hung up on a wall, and you're creating your own sampler today. Pretty cool.
It was usually called an Irish chain.
Well, let's pull that out. I'm going to come in here, and you little lady in red here. And what colors did Sid's granddaughter want this quilt to be in?
Black and white.
Black and white. Yes, and music. And it's called a sampler. Why is it called a sampler?
Because he already has the color.
And what patch was this? Remember we were talking how patches had different names? Can you tell me what's the name of that block? Can you count them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What's that called?
9 patch.
9 patch. Do you see a 4 patch in this room? How about that blue one in the corner? Do you see why that's called a 4 patch? You see, they all had names. And cool. It's called a card trick. And that's just made by making different pieces. And that's a fly foot variation. Kind of looks like a swastika, doesn't it? But they had all different shapes for quilts. Okay? And you see, Sid has portable quilt frame that she can take. If she wants to go to Florida with her husband, they just get in the car and she takes her portable quilt frame along. You see.
Originally, it was just
And her
a
husband
hoop,
designed that for her to hold on her lap.
and he put the legs in the bottom on for me.
Isn't that a neat idea?
So then
You
I
gotta invent that.
Well,
That would be a neat thing to have, wouldn't it? Then you wouldn't have to
easier
just
for
go
me.
on your frame.
don't have to bend over and get a bad backache. Or if I was at that one, oh, my back would be hurting.
This one is called a Birch Creek Square. And it starts with the square in the middle, and then the quilter
You're back
uses, you
again.
can use a sewing machine on some of these straight lines and sew pieces together too. That makes it go faster. But the quilting is still done by going through both sides. See?
Are you one?
That neat. Martina made that one. I made this one. It's called a split rail fence, kind of like a split fence. It's supposed to look like a split rail fence. That's for my daughter, Annie, and this is for my other daughter. This kind is what kind of quilt? Who can name me what kind of? You've just done it, so I know you know the name of this quilt. Embroidery. This is an embroidery quilt, right? And you see, what kind of embroidery do you see in here? Cross stitch, and then you have the little flowers and the little French knots. Did you learn those? Uh-huh. Yeah, that's great that your art teacher taught you that. It's a wonderful thing to know. This one is made with what geometric shape? Yes, and you see these corners? This is called prairie points. It's because of the prairie and the pioneers. It's one way to finish your quilt. Another way to finish your quilt, and the more common way, is to bind it. And Martina chose the same fabric that she had in the center. You can even buy binding it, but she makes her own because she does everything kind of by hand.
princess, elderly woman behind the counter in a small town.
What do I do with all this stuff? Roll them up.
First time?
Second, actually.
Enjoying it?
Oh, yes.
We'll brought you back here this year, and I'm with TV27, so you know.
Okay.
So you don't have to answer too much.
I like doing this stuff, and I don't know. Just the whole atmosphere and like making up your own designs and having people enjoy it, you know, and compliment it. It's really interesting. Yeah, I like it.
You come with an idea, or do you get one as you're here?
Kind of, sort of. I looked on the internet a little bit and then made this up.
Okay, and I'm speaking with?
Bridget Lindauer.
And you're?
Forest Park.
Okay.
You're ready to start gluing too, and you can glue. You're gonna have to.
Yeah, let me see and I'll find some. Looks like carpet. Yeah. It's proper carpet like this.
Sack is? What's a feed sack? So how many of you are farmers? Great. So what's a feed sack, farmer guy?
You put feed, it's like this bag of like, sometimes wool, and you put like
Corn and wheat and things like that, right. And you'll see in the exhibits, when you see the other exhibits, that Abe Lincoln even used to ride with his dad to come to the Jasper feed mill to buy feed for his farm in Dale. And he came all the way to Jasper to buy his feed. So it was pretty important. In the 1920s, the feed sack people got smart because they knew the women were using the feed bags to make, you must have known that.
I mean, back in the old days, that they didn't have much money, so it's really hard to go out and buy clothes.
Exactly.
And so,
it's almost impossible.
And also, it takes a lot of time to get the regular stuff that you would get like from your garden and things to make clothes.
That's right.
So to conserve the things that you already have.
You are a natural historian. They really did. And some of your grandmas or great-grandmas will tell you that their mothers made dresses. And this is an article from a magazine that just talks about the old days, like what this museum is about. It's called Reminiscence. Do you see the word REM from remember? It's about reminiscing. That's thinking back on the old days with happiness. That's what reminiscence means.
She made me wash down the sea. My stepmother was a widow when my father married. She had 3 children of her own. It was John, Matilda, and Elizabeth. And my cousin Dennis Hanks moved in after his folks died, also of lung sickness. And 16 feet wide. Now, we didn't have some schools back then. The schools that we went to were called blab schools. Now, the reason they were called blab schools was that our schools were about like our house. Made out of logs, about 18 feet long, about 16 feet wide. And we had students in there all the way from the age of 6 to the age of 16. The teacher used to have us all stand up and say our lessons out loud at the same time, which made it a very noisy place to try to learn to read and write and do arithmetic. That reminds me of a story. Anybody here good at arithmetic? Somebody's good at story problems? I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you all a story problem. You know the answer, you just yell it right out, all right? Now suppose I have 3 birds sitting on a fence over there. I grab my father's rifle, I shoot 1 bird off the fence. How many are going to be left? 2. That's good arithmetic, but you're wrong. You know why? What's going to happen when they shoot the first bird off the fence? The others are going to fly away, so how many are going to be left? 0. 2's good arithmetic, but the correct answer in this case is 0. Now, I was only able to go to this lab school during December and January when I was not needed to help on the farm. But I could only go to school when the weather was good enough that I could walk the 3 miles or so to get to school. If you total up all the time I've spent in school learning to read and to write and do arithmetic, I spent less than 1 year in school. I loved to read more than anything else. I loved to read about people that I would never get to meet and places that I would never get to see. I read Pilgrim's Progress and the Bible. My mom had a copy of Aesop's Fables that I read over and over and over again. I borrowed books from the neighbors whenever I could. I remember once I borrowed a book from Mr. Crawford down the road. The book was called The Life of George Washington by a man by the name of Weems. It was about George Washington.
Over here are some old dolls and a baby bed that a lot of people really like to see because there's a lot of handiwork that went into that.
And also, I want you to know that the baby pictures in the bed are my mom and dad.
You said, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is my mother and that's my dad, taken about 102 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
And that you don't see
My mother
beds
was
made
born,
like that
well, she was
anymore.
born 1910, but my dad was born 1904. And so, that's their pictures. I was a Cinderella.
Many years ago.
Many years ago. Did you see the little dresses?
Let's move on down this way a little bit.
I don't see if they bend it.
Yep. Oxen. Is it ox? I keep saying this to my kids, and they or my grandkids. I forget.
We are going to open up another area over here in a future date. We're putting in all of the sports memorabilia from the county. And those of you don't remember it, but then a number of years ago, schools reorganized. And before that time, there were a bunch of schools here in this county. And they had the Arlen Spuds, Bird's Eye Yellow Jackets.
Actual school guys, Arlen Spuds, high school team.
Yeah, people always say that Ireland's the Spud Town.
Yeah. Spud potato.
Yeah.
In 1963, they won the regional.
It's a gas station.
Yeah, they were, there was a lot of,
Bird's Eye Yellow Jackets.
but there were a lot of schools in the county that were closed when they reorganized. Over here, we start out with
Winslow, I guess.
with the actual tools that were used back in those days. In 1821, the first
Still
sawmill
holds a
was
record,
built
never be broken.
in India.
But this thing still work. You can get a desk.